All right, thank you for joining us for this walkthrough of the Treadstone Risk Management Risk Analytics Dashboard. I just want to start off by saying that this is version 1.0 of this dashboard. The dashboard will be evolving over time as we kind of add some things to it. Version 1 really just kind of focuses on claims trend analysis and overall total cost of risk and the drivers of the total cost of risk. So we'll be adding some more qualitative elements to this. Full-scale operational survey will go with it, and we'll talk about at the end kind of what the end product of this is, really what the purpose is. It is for any commercial or public or nonprofit entity that's out there. Talking about the purpose, the overall purpose of this is to take a more calculated and proactive approach to risk management and loss control. A lot of self-purported risk managers out there, they really just kind of have a prescription that they give to every single one of their clients, and it doesn't really get very tailored. It's not very measured, and as you'll see, it ends up kind of be like throwing darts at a dartboard. Having a really well put together risk management program goes well beyond just knowing the different trainings and the different loss control devices and personal protective equipment that can be utilized, because you can't just throw all of that at a client and expect it to work. You have to take a very managed approach. So let's get right into it here. So the very first, before I even get into these charts and whatnot, you'll see the tabs down at the bottom. Essentially, why do we do this? Well, we take a big, long list of data like this that would, take a long time to manually chunk through, and some premium history here. And we automate the process of being able to kind of pull these things apart or put them together in graphical format so that then we can derive some conclusions and prescribe some proactive techniques and solutions to try and drive down the overall cost of risk for a client. So right off the bat, in the top left-hand corner, you should see this total cost of risk by year chart. Essentially what this is total cost of risk works out to what you pay in your premiums, what you pay for any claims in terms of your deductible, and then you can even add in some loss expenses associated with whatever your training expenses are, or maybe overtime, or whatever budget line item is associated to your loss control or your risk management team. For the purposes of this, we're using some dummy data from a city in the Northeast. And I didn't really include the budget line item for those expenses because that's going to differ based off of each individual entity. So just remember that can all be added in. As long as you're budgeting for it and tracking it, that can get added into this calculation. But so what you'll see is a spike in both the total cost of the risk is this green line on the top. The out-of-pocket costs here is this red line in the middle. And then the blue line that's just kind of trending slowly upward is the total premiums that are paid each year. And as you'll notice, once the out-of-pocket spikes, so does the total cost of risk, and then it kind of comes down to earth a little bit. But over time, the overall trend is positive or up. I wouldn't necessarily call it positive. But so the one thing that you'll notice a lot of times with this chart is it's not always linear like this. There's not always a direct relationship. This dummy data has some extremes, and you'll see it has some extremes in terms of employment practices, liability claims, and it has some extremes in terms of workers' compensation claims. But so in this data, sometimes you can have some moving parts, right? So one year you might choose to take a higher retention or a lower deductible. And so those things can really change the dynamic of these three lines and how they work together, essentially. The combination of these two lines is this third one. And a lot of times you'll see someone saying, oh, well, my insurance program is getting way too expensive. And you take a look at it, and maybe they took a high retention when they shouldn't, and they don't do a really good job of risk managing themselves. So they pay a lot of out-of-pocket money for claims. Sometimes, they might think that they're doing really great on their insurance program, but actually they're overpaying because they hardly have any claims. Their out of pocket is almost nothing, and essentially they're paying the insurance company more money than maybe they should be. So that's all of those dynamics can come out of this one analysis in this chart. The second chart is just looking by line of coverage. This data was over a 5-year time period. There were really only like 2.5 years that were really of high quality data, because this came from a self-insured pool that we pulled some of this data out of, and there wasn't really good data for the first couple of years. But you'll see that you get a spike in the employment practices liability claims, and that's kind of maybe not to this extent, but this is a similar trend that's happening throughout the industry. Employment practice liability claims are becoming extremely expensive over time. And then you'll see workers' comp is the biggest driver of claims. You'll also see some other dynamics in here, one of which is you have some high liability claims in here, almost $1 million over a 5-year period, so that's something of significance. And then also you see almost $900,000 of property claims. This claim set also includes a catastrophic Hurricane Sandy type event in it, and that's why you see that dynamic. So now as we scroll down in the dashboard, the next set of charts really look at by department. Like I said, this is a dummy data from a city. This could quite as easily be a manufacturing company, or a distributor, or a not-for-profit organization that has a handful or maybe even only a couple of departments. But what we're really trying to get a grasp of here with these two charts is where are claims coming from, right? So the biggest driver of these claims is the DPW. I can tell you from some items that we'll look at further down the line here that part of that is workers' comp claims, but part of that is also how those property claims from that catastrophic event got logged. That went to the DPW, so that's something to keep in mind. The administration piece is the second most expensive here, and so that administration piece is about 23%. And again, that has to do with the employment practices liability claims. Those claims have originated from a number of different departments, but the overall idea is that the administrative or even the executive director capacity is the one that kind of sets the trend for those types of employment practices. They draft the handbook. They make sure that they're doing the oversight on employee complaints and whatnot. So that's why it gets ascribed to the administration function. And then you'll see police and fire, as you would expect, are two of the larger departments as well in terms of driving these claims. Again, these are all lines put together. So they include motor vehicle accidents, physical damage to vehicles, property, general liability, workers' comp, all of those. All right, so the next set of charts that we look at here is the total net incurred for workers' comp claims for each year. This is a way of really just kind of isolating workers' comp claims. And again, it doesn't go as far. We'll go further into the departmental breakdown after this, but this is just kind of give you an idea of the workers' comp claims. The Sandy type event happened in 2012. So again, you see a spike in those claims because during that catastrophic event, there were a number of also catastrophic injuries that occurred as a result of whether it's firefighters or DPW or police officers responding to situations. So you'll see an overall trend. Like I said, the first couple of years here are kind of light. So as we move to the second chart, what we're really looking here, we're looking at the average cost of each workers' comp claim versus the total number of claims that we have each year. And so we have really good data from 2012, 13, and as you can see, when this data was collected, it was about halfway through to 2014. So you could kind of see that trend. There's actually a kind of a positive trend there where the average cost of each claim is going down. What this chart really points to is whether or not you have a frequency problem, meaning too many claims or too few claims, but that's usually not a problem. A severity problem, meaning that maybe you don't have a lot of claims, but each one that you have is catastrophic or very costly, or maybe both. When you see both of these lines trending higher, then you have a real issue. Because these are dummy claims, there's some kind of noise in this chart, but a lot of times you'll see with larger entities, you'll see a nice trend develop for both of these, the bars as well as the line and the claims count. All right, so the next thing that we look at is seasonality. So we're looking at and each one of these numbers down below 1 to 12 correspond with the month during the year. What we're really trying to identify is how many claims are we having each month, whether we have any spikes, and then also how many claims by the type of cause are we having during those months. And you'll see some things that are kind of might make sense. This first one kind of looks at by department by month, and you'll see that the DPW spikes to 48 in October. Again, that Superstorm Sandy dynamic. But then you'll also see some other trends here. So the DPW also spikes in July, and so when they, go outdoors to do whether it be wood clearing from the winter, or maintenance, lawn maintenance, landscaping, things like that, they have a pop in claims. You also see a pop in claims in February for the DPW. Almost guaranteed these are slip, trip, and fall claims, but so that's why we move on to the second chart here to see exactly what's going on here. That pop in claims in terms of the total count here really goes to these miscellaneous claims, and again, that echoes those claims that are associated with the Superstorm Sandy. These 17 claims are associated with the summertime exposures. The Superstorm Sandy exposures or the claims causes are kind of across the board here in October, and you see a wide spread of those types of claims there. So not all of them were the same exact claim. So how does this help us out? Well, this really helps us out because a lot of clients will ask us, all right, what kind of safety training do we have to have? Well, the safety training might be, slip, trip, and fall claim, slip, trip, and fall safety training or ladder training. Well, when that training makes the most sense is right before you have the biggest exposures to those types of activities and those types of operations. And so if you're giving slip, trip, and fall training in August, by November and December, at least in the Northeast, when it starts to get cold and rainy and snowy and icy, that training isn't necessarily going to be really kind of fresh in their minds. And so what you want to do is strategically pick when you're doing training, not just what type of training you're doing, okay? By the cause of claim, we can identify, all right, we need, in February we have slip and falls, so we need some, safe operating training that's associated with, cold weather and precipitation, and we also need some personal protective equipment, maybe reevaluating what we use in terms of chucks for feet or some other kind of, tread on work boots and whatnot. So that dynamic can play out anywhere here. Another thing to note is seasonality can also show you whether or not some of your workforce are putting in some, I won't call them fraudulent, but I would call them some suspect claims right in the end of summer when maybe they've run out of vacation time. All right, so the last set of charts here really kind of look at the claim count by claim cause for each department and the total net incurred. So again, the frequency on the left and the severity on the right. And so you'll see that we have a lot of sprain and strain claims for the police department. Crime response and slip, trip, and fall are also the biggest frequency. But now what we see is motor vehicle accident is actually the largest cost item here for the police department. So whereas we do have a frequency issue, which we can treat this, you're going to get your biggest bang for your buck if you can drive down those motor vehicle workers' comp claims. And guaranteed, not all of these are a police officer being hit by someone else. They probably include either joint fault, or several of them are probably the police officer's fault, or in response of a crime or a call. So that's one dynamic that also plays out here is we can identify, which claims we have most frequently, because where there's smoke, there's fire. And then the other thing that we can identify is, all right, what's costing us the most? Because if we can really drive those claims down, that's going to have the biggest bang for our buck, especially if we have to invest a little money in safety training or personal protective equipment. And again, you see that dynamic play out throughout here. So really quickly to wrap this up, so once we do this whole analysis, the one thing that we're looking to do is identify key performance indicators, identify goals and objectives for performance, and then ultimately we're looking to prescribe solutions and operational changes to achieve those goals and drive those key performance indicators in the right direction. So I'll shoot another one of these once we have phase 2 done, which should be in a couple of weeks. And so I thank you for joining us.